The skies over Earth were clear, the peaceful silence of space holding a delicate balance. Life on the planet continued as usual, with no hint of the impending storm. Yet in the midst of this calm, something extraordinary was unfolding, something that would change the fate of humanity forever. Deep within Earth's Defense Command Center, Captain John sat at his station, scanning the data feeds. He was no stranger to the humdrum of routine surveillance. Yet today, something felt different. His eyes narrowed as an unusual signal crossed the radar, one that wasn't supposed to exist. It was faint, a low-frequency pulse buried under the usual cosmic noise, but unmistakable. It was a signal. At first, the operators dismissed it as a glitch, just another anomaly in the vast expanse of space, a mere blip on their radar screen. But Captain John's instincts told him otherwise. He leaned forward, his fingers flying over the controls, isolating the signal for closer inspection. "Sir, the signal's coming from deep space," reported Lieutenant Carter, his voice tense. "It's faint, but it's consistent." John's gaze hardened. He could tell by the tone in his voice that this was not just some stray cosmic disturbance. No, this felt deliberate. But who would send a signal like this? And from where? Earth was not exactly on the radar of any known alien civilizations, at least not in any way that was worth noticing. So, why now? The signal came in short bursts, almost as if it was trying to convey something, a warning perhaps, or maybe a distress call. The message was unlike anything they had encountered before. As Captain John stared at the screen, he felt a cold chill run down his spine. There was something unnerving about it. The more they tried to decode it, the clearer it became. This was not a friendly message. The command center quickly kicked into action. The best engineers, cryptographers, and officers scrambled to identify the source. While Earth's defense forces had been on high alert due to potential space threats, nothing could have prepared them for what was to come. As the team tried to pinpoint the exact location of the signal, another more troubling discovery was made. Earth's satellite defense systems, the most advanced in the galaxy, had suddenly detected something moving fast toward the planet. It wasn't just one ship, but an entire fleet. Captain John's heart raced. The report came in just as he had suspected, alien ships. But these weren't just any ships. These were cloaked, hidden beneath advanced technology that Earth's systems couldn't track, not until they were practically on top of them. "Alert all stations," Captain John ordered, his voice sharp. "We've got incoming. I need full scans on all sectors now." His mind raced, trying to piece together the situation. How had they gotten so close without being detected? This was not just a routine alien encounter. The cloak technology used by these ships was unlike anything they had seen before. It was sophisticated, designed to bypass the most advanced detection systems. Whoever was on the other side of this attack was leagues ahead of Earth's technology. As the fleet neared the planet, Earth's defense systems finally began to register the alien ships. But it was too late for anything to stop them. The enemy fleet had already breached the outer perimeter. The first wave of alien ships dropped their cloaks, revealing their sleek, metallic forms. They were massive, their designs entirely alien, with no human analog to compare them to. The ships were as advanced as they were terrifying, each one bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single strike. They loomed in the sky like dark omens, their engines glowing with eerie light. Captain John had seen many things during his time as a commander, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer scale and power of this alien force. His team had trained for years, preparing for almost every possible scenario. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Their cloaking technology alone was enough to make it clear that Earth was facing an entirely new enemy, one that had outsmarted every defense measure humanity had put in place. A grim silence settled over the command center as the fleet came into full view. John could see the alien ships forming a tight formation, circling Earth like vultures preparing to strike. The power in their movements, The way they held their position with such confidence made it clear this was no random attack. This was a deliberate strike, planned down to the smallest detail. The tension in the room was palpable. Earth's commanders, once full of pride and confidence, now felt the weight of their vulnerability. The superior technology of the enemy was something they had never experienced before. How could they defend themselves against an adversary that had already anticipated their every move? Just then, the first wave of attacks began. Earth's defense systems, usually so reliable, struggled to respond. The alien ships fired their weapons, sending out beams of energy that tore through satellites, cutting off communications and disabling global defense systems in seconds. The air was thick with a sense of impending doom as John watched helplessly on his screens. Every move they made to retaliate seemed to be countered with ease. It felt as if the enemy knew their every thought before they even made it. John's hands tightened on the console. He had trained for this. He had fought in simulated wars against enemies who mirrored the capabilities of humanity's greatest rivals. But nothing in those simulations could prepare him for this. The alien ships weren't just using advanced weapons. They were using tactics, deception, and technology that Earth could barely comprehend. They had the advantage of knowing exactly how humanity would respond every step of the way. Why now? John whispered to himself. Who are they, and why attack us? As if on cue, a chilling realization hit him. This wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration. A message to Earth that their days of dominance were numbered. The aliens were not here for diplomacy or peaceful exploration. They were here to conquer, to wipe out everything in their path. They were testing the limits of human defense, and John knew deep down that they weren't finished yet. Captain John's thoughts were interrupted as Lieutenant Carter spoke up, his voice trembling with urgency. "Sir, we've just received a transmission. It's from the aliens. They're demanding Earth's surrender." John froze. The transmission was intercepted and translated by the defense systems, and the message sent a shiver through everyone in the room. "Surrender now, or be destroyed. Your planet is nothing compared to the power of our fleet." The room fell silent once again. The demand hung in the air like a death sentence. John's heart sank. It was no longer a question of whether they could fight back. It was a question of whether Earth had enough time to prepare. The clock was ticking. Time was running out. And the alien fleet, with its overwhelming force, had already begun its next move. John stood tall, his face set with determination. "We're not surrendering. Prepare for the next phase of defense." But deep inside, he knew the stakes had just been raised. And this time, humanity would need to fight not just for survival, but for its very future. The stage was set. Captain John had just realized that humanity was up against an enemy like no other, an enemy that had the power to change everything. But how would they fight back? How could Earth's defenses stand a chance against an enemy this formidable? As the alien ships prepared for their next strike, the tension in the room was palpable. The fate of Earth rested in the hands of Captain John and his team. They had no choice but to face this new and terrifying threat head-on, even if the odds seemed impossible. In the distance, the alien fleet moved closer, preparing to make their move. And Earth's final defense had only just begun. The moment the alien fleet dropped its cloaks and revealed its terrifying presence, Earth's skies erupted into chaos. The once peaceful blue heavens were now a battleground, filled with streaks of light and the roar of energy weapons tearing through the atmosphere. Captain John stood firm, his eyes locked onto the view screens, watching as the alien ships descended from the edge of space with the precision of a hunter stalking its prey. The fleet was enormous. Hundreds of ships, each one massive and sleek, glided through the air with an almost unnatural grace. Their metallic surfaces shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting a cold, menacing light. The hum of their engines could be felt even through the walls of the command center. Each ship was a fortress, designed not just for war, but for destruction on a scale Earth had never witnessed before. The first strike came swiftly. Without warning, The alien ships released a volley of orbital bombardment. Beams of concentrated energy shot down from the skies, piercing the atmosphere and raining down upon Earth's major cities. The power of the weapons was overwhelming. Entire blocks of buildings were obliterated in seconds, reduced to rubble and ash. The death toll climbed by the second as skyscrapers, homes, and businesses disintegrated under the relentless assault. John's heart raced. He could see it all unfold on the screen, the vibrant colors of Earth's cities flashing in stark contrast to the devastating blasts. The once thriving urban centers now lay in ruins. It was a nightmare, one he couldn't wake up from. Deploy countermeasures. Launch all available defenses, Captain John barked, his voice sharp and filled with urgency. But despite the command, there was little that Earth's defense systems could do. The alien fleet had come prepared, their weapons and technology far superior to anything humanity had developed. Cloaking technology made their ships nearly impossible to track until they were almost on top of Earth, and now their bombardment continued relentlessly. The attacks were precise, targeting civilian hubs, power stations, and strategic locations with calculated efficiency. The defense forces attempted to respond, sending out fighter jets and defensive missiles in retaliation. However, the alien ships effortlessly dodged or intercepted every counterattack. One by one, the human fighters were shot down, their missiles deflected by the alien ship's shields or destroyed mid-flight by advanced energy blasts. Each failed attempt to retaliate only added to the mounting sense of helplessness among Earth's forces. John's mind raced. This was not a fight they could win with brute force alone. Their technology, though formidable, was no match for what they were up against. The alien fleet seemed to anticipate every move, and their weapons ripped through the air with precision. It felt like they had studied human tactics, learned how they would react, and adapted accordingly. They were not simply attacking, they were dissecting Earth's defenses, knowing exactly where to strike. As the barrage continued, John watched helplessly as entire cities were erased from the map. The destruction was unfathomable. Millions of people were dying, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The sheer scale of the attack left John breathless, his stomach tightening in disbelief. He had trained for moments like this, but nothing could prepare him for the devastation unfolding before his eyes. Then something happened that shook him to his core. The ground beneath his feet trembled as another wave of bombs fell, this time targeting the military bases that housed Earth's most advanced weapons. The bombs exploded with such force that the shockwaves could be felt even in the command center. The entire building rocked as if it were nothing more than a leaf in a storm. John's team scrambled to hold onto their positions, but the force of the explosion sent papers flying and equipment crashing to the ground. "Damn it," John shouted, his fists clenching in frustration. "We need to fight back. We can't let them tear us apart like this." He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him harder than ever before. His team was depending on him, and Earth's survival rested on their shoulders. The alien fleet had taken the initiative, and now it was up to Captain John to lead his forces through this onslaught. But the task seemed impossible. The alien ships, now fully visible in their terrible majesty, continued to hover ominously above Earth. Their weapons were devastatingly accurate, and their shields were impenetrable. John could hear the reports from his commanders coming in, their voices thick with fear and disbelief. Cities were falling, and there was no sign of mercy from the alien invaders. The Earth was under siege. The worst of it all was the realization that despite their best efforts, humanity was losing. For the first time in his career, Captain John felt the cold grip of panic. They had no way of knowing how to stop the alien ships. There was no strategy that would work against such advanced technology. Every countermeasure they deployed was quickly countered by the enemy. Amidst the devastation, John's thoughts went back to his team. He knew they were struggling too. His trusted Lieutenant Carter was coordinating efforts to scramble what remained of Earth's defense systems, but there were so few resources left to fight back. It was hard to even fathom how quickly the tide had turned against them. But even in the midst of this catastrophe, John knew one thing. They couldn't just give up. He wasn't going to let his people die without a fight. The situation was dire, but he had led them this far, and he couldn't let that be the end. As the explosions continued to echo in the distance, John stood tall, despite the sinking feeling in his chest. His team needed a leader, and it was his responsibility to show them that they weren't finished yet. They had to survive. They had to find a way. "Focus," John shouted, his voice breaking through the panic. "We can still fight. Prepare the new countermeasures. We have to hit them where it hurts." But deep inside, he knew the task ahead of them was monumental. The alien ships had taken full control of the skies, and Earth's defenses were crumbling under the pressure. How could they fight back? How could they possibly survive an enemy this powerful? The battle for Earth was far from over, but with each passing moment, the chances of survival seemed to grow slimmer. The stage was set for humanity's greatest fight, and whether they won or lost, the next move was theirs. Captain John stood in front of the holographic map, his mind racing as he surveyed the destruction the alien fleet had wrought on Earth. The sky was still heavy with the wreckage of cities, and the world below was on the brink of collapse. But amid the devastation, one thought kept John's focus sharp. They weren't finished yet. Humanity had taken a devastating blow, but it wasn't the end. They still had a chance. "We found a way to strike back." John's voice was steady, though his mind was anything but. His team, exhausted and battle-worn, gathered around him, listening intently. The plan they had come up with wasn't flawless, but it was humanity's best shot. They had discovered something that could turn the tide of the war: the alien fleet's cloaking devices. The enemy's ships were almost invisible to Earth's defense systems, but the scientists had found a way to disrupt the cloaking field. They had developed a cloaking disruptor technology that could expose the ships for brief moments, making them vulnerable to attack. It was a slim chance, but it was the only chance they had left. "We're going to take down the flagship," John said, his tone firm. The alien flagship was the heart of their fleet, and taking it out would be a huge blow to the invaders' morale. If they could disable it, they might have a shot at pushing back the rest of the alien forces. The mission was dangerous, more dangerous than anything they had faced before. It wasn't just a matter of taking out a few enemy ships. It was about sneaking into the heart of the alien fleet, facing the flagship's advanced weapons, and striking before they could react. It was a suicide mission for most, but John and his team had no choice. The fate of Earth rested in their hands. The plan was set, and the team was ready. Captain John, Lieutenant Carter, and the rest of the soldiers gathered in the hangar, boarding their most advanced fighter ships. These were the last of Earth's fighter crafts, and they were their only means of reaching the alien flagship. The fighters were equipped with the cloaking disruptor devices, but they had to get close enough to the flagship to use them. As they launched into space, the enormity of the task ahead weighed heavily on John's shoulders. The alien ships were everywhere, circling the Earth like vultures, waiting to pick off any stragglers. The cloaking disruptor was their only hope, but even with it, they would be walking into the heart of enemy territory. They had no idea what kind of traps the aliens had set. John's fighter soared through space, his mind focused on the task at hand. The stars around him were nothing more than distant pinpricks of light, offering no comfort in the cold vastness of space. The rest of the team followed closely behind, their ships lined up like a deadly formation, ready to strike. As they neared the alien fleet, the tension grew unbearable. The cloaking devices of the alien ships were still active, and John couldn't see a thing. The enemy was out there, lurking in the darkness. Every moment was a potential ambush. Every second they weren't exposed a second closer to death. They had to move fast. The alien flagship, a massive, looming structure in the distance, was still cloaked, and the disruptor device was their only hope of breaking through its defenses. The first strike came unexpectedly. A burst of energy from the darkness sent a blast of light streaking across the battlefield, narrowly missing John's ship. The enemy had already detected them. The aliens had likely seen the disruption in the space-time continuum caused by the cloaking disruptors and were preparing for retaliation. "Hold steady," John barked into the comms. "Activate the disruptors." At the same time, the cloaking disruptor technology powered up. The disruptors sent out waves of energy that tore through the cloaking fields surrounding the alien ships, briefly revealing their positions. The ships that had been invisible to the naked eye now shimmered into existence, their sleek forms visible against the backdrop of space. It was a brief moment of clarity in the midst of the chaos. "Now, attack," John commanded. The human fighters swooped in, catching the alien ships off guard. The element of surprise was on their side. John's team fired their advanced missiles and energy beams, striking at the heart of the alien vessels. Sparks flew, and explosions lit up the void of space as the alien ships, momentarily visible, were torn apart. But they were still far outnumbered, and the alien forces quickly adapted. Alien fighter ships, larger and faster than anything humanity had ever built, darted through space with unnatural agility. They fired back, launching energy pulses that lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks. John's team barely avoided the blasts, weaving in and out of the path of destruction. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, and every turn brought them closer to the heart of the alien fleet. John's pulse quickened as they closed in on the alien flagship. The massive ship, with its imposing form and defensive shields, loomed ahead. It was the source of the alien fleet's power, and if they could take it out, the rest of the fleet would crumble. But getting to it wasn't going to be easy. The flagship's weapons were powerful enough to obliterate any ship that came too close, and they had only moments before the cloak was restored. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Carter shouted, her voice filled with urgency. They had reached the flagship's defensive perimeter, and it was time to make their final push. The cloaking disruptor technology sent out another pulse, exposing the flagship's shield generators, the weak point of the massive ship. John aimed his ship's weapons at the exposed area and fired with all his might. The alien flagship shook as the missiles slammed into the shield generators. Sparks flew from the ship's surface, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the flagship would falter. But the retaliation was swift. The flagship's defensive shields flared up, and the air around it crackled with the energy from its counterattack. "We've got to keep the pressure on," John ordered. He could feel the tension in the air. Every move they made a matter of life or death. As they pushed forward, John's mind raced. They were getting close, but they had no time to waste. The longer they lingered, the more vulnerable they became. He had to finish this now, before the aliens realized what they were doing. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, the flagship's shields faltered. The damage was done. The flagship was exposed, and it was vulnerable. It was humanity's moment to strike. The battle had been intense, the pressure mounting with every passing second. Captain John had seen more destruction in the past few hours than most people saw in a lifetime. His team had fought valiantly, pushing the limits of human endurance and technology, but the stakes had grown even higher. As they neared their objective, the heart of the alien fleet, John couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of dread. They were getting closer to their goal, but at a terrible cost. The alien forces had responded with ferocity, and human casualties were mounting. The once tight-knit team was starting to feel the toll of endless combat. For every alien ship they destroyed, another seemed to take its place, more powerful, more relentless. But the worst blow came when they lost one of their own. Lieutenant Carter had always been one of John's closest allies. She was tough, resourceful, and always ready to sacrifice for the mission. But in the heat of the battle, as they fought to disable the alien flagship's shield generators, Carter's ship was hit. A massive explosion rocked the craft, sending it spiraling into the void of space. John watched helplessly through the cockpit as her ship vanished, a trail of fiery debris marking its final moments. "No," John shouted, gripping the controls so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart raced, but there was no time to mourn. The fight wasn't over yet, And Carter's sacrifice had to mean something. It had to push them forward. The team was devastated. Lieutenant Carter had been more than just a fellow soldier. She had been a friend. The loss was a painful reminder of the price of war, and it cut deeper than John had anticipated. But even in the midst of his grief, he knew what had to be done. He couldn't let Carter's death be in vain. The team regrouped, their resolve hardening in the face of their loss. But as they prepared for the final assault on the flagship, something unexpected happened. The alien fleet, which had been pushing them to their breaking point, suddenly faltered. The once imposing formation seemed to break apart, with some ships veering off from the main force. John's sensors flickered, and he watched in disbelief as a small group of alien ships started moving toward them. Only they weren't attacking. They were retreating. "What the hell is going on?" John muttered, confusion flooding his mind. The aliens, who had been relentless in their assault, now seemed to be in disarray. His comms buzzed with a transmission that wasn't from any of their own forces. The voice on the other end was unmistakable, alien, but with a tone of desperation. "We are not your enemy," the voice said, broken and weary. "Please, you have to listen. We fight against our commanders, not you." John's mind raced as he processed the message. It sounded like a plea for help, but from where? And why now, of all times? The voice continued, "Our high command. They've betrayed us. We were forced into this war against your people, but now we can no longer follow them. We want to join you, help you bring an end to this madness." John's heart pounded in his chest. A rebellion within the ranks of the alien fleet. It didn't make sense, but the sincerity in the voice was undeniable. His gut told him it was genuine. He glanced at his team, who were equally puzzled by the sudden turn of events. He was hesitant, but he knew this could change everything. If the alien soldiers were indeed revolting against their commanders, it could turn the tide of the war. But could they trust them? After everything that had happened, could John risk accepting an ally from the very forces that had nearly destroyed Earth? John had no time to waste. The alien fleet was still a threat, and the flagship was within reach. He needed to make a decision quickly, but the emotions of Carter's death weighed heavily on him. He didn't want to dishonor her sacrifice by making a mistake now. "Can we trust them?" Lieutenant Grant asked, his voice filled with doubt. "I don't know," John replied, his voice strained. "But we don't have much of a choice." The unexpected ally offered John and his team a way to disable the flagship's defenses from within. They claimed to have knowledge of the ship's weak points, knowledge they were willing to share in exchange for their freedom. The betrayal within the alien ranks, though shocking, could be the key to ending the war. It was a risk, but at this point, what did they have to lose? John knew what he had to do. The team had lost too much to let this chance slip away. He reached for the comms and spoke to the alien rebel. "All right," John said, his voice hard with resolve. "We'll take you up on your offer. But if you betray us, I will make sure you regret it." There was a brief pause before the alien responded. "We understand. We want the same thing you do, an end to this war." John activated his ship's thrusters, signaling to the team that they would follow the aliens' instructions. It was time for a final assault on the flagship. But as they moved into position, a pang of unease gripped John's heart. The aliens' offer could be a trap, an elaborate ruse to get them into the heart of the enemy fleet, where they could be destroyed. But something in John's gut told him it was real. The pain of Carter's death, the betrayal within the alien ranks, and the chance to end the war all mingled together in his mind. His team followed closely behind, and as they neared the flagship, John took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. It wasn't just about taking down the enemy anymore. It was about avenging the losses, honoring the fallen, and ensuring that humanity's fight for survival would be remembered. They were about to enter the lion's den, and every second felt like an eternity. The risk was enormous, but the alternative, facing annihilation, was even worse. John's heart burned with a fierce determination. the memory of his fallen comrades fueling every decision he made. The final battle was coming, and nothing was certain. But one thing was clear: John would not let the sacrifices of his team be forgotten. The war was far from over, but humanity's resolve had never been stronger. The silence of space was shattered by the roar of engines, the hum of energy shields, and the sharp crackle of weapons fire. Captain John's heart raced as the countdown to Earth's annihilation continued. They had only minutes before the alien flagship's main weapon, a massive planet-destroying cannon, was fully charged and ready to fire. Earth's last line of defense had been shattered, and now it was up to John and his team to prevent the unimaginable, an extinction-level event. The stakes had never been higher. John's ship cut through the vast emptiness of space, his eyes fixed on the distant alien flagship. It was a monstrous craft, a looming fortress bristling with weapons and shield generators. It was the heart of the alien fleet, and it had to be destroyed if Earth was to survive. The team's final assault had begun. Their ships danced through the debris field, weaving between destroyed alien ships and wreckage from previous battles. Orbital bombardment rained down on Earth from above, but John's team pressed on, undeterred by the chaos around them. The tension in the air was thick, the sense of impending doom suffocating. "Stay focused, everyone," John said, his voice steady despite the intensity of the situation. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." The alien fleet's advanced eye-controlled machines were a constant threat, their robotic precision making them a formidable enemy. They launched coordinated attacks, their weapons fast and deadly, designed to overwhelm human defenses. But John's team was used to fighting the impossible. They were the underdogs, the ones no one expected to win. And it was that very spirit, the will to survive, to defy the odds, that had brought them this far. The first wave of alien drones descended on them, their sleek forms cutting through the dark sky like shadows. They were fast, and their weaponry was designed to disable human ships with pinpoint accuracy. But the humans were faster, their ships agile and unpredictable. John's team dodged and weaved, returning fire with their own weapons. Explosions erupted all around them, each one a violent reminder of the stakes. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Grant shouted over the comms, his voice tinged with urgency. "The flagship is just ahead." John's mind raced. They had to get through the remaining defenses and destroy the alien flagship before it could fire. Every second counted, and there was no room for error. His team had trained for this moment, but even so, the pressure was overwhelming. The weight of their mission, the loss of comrades, and the fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. As they approached the flagship, the alien defense systems intensified. The flagship unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, attempting to push them back. The crew had to use every ounce of skill. They had to avoid being obliterated in the crossfire. John's pulse quickened as they got closer to the ship's core, the glowing heart of the enemy's weaponry. Locking onto their weak points, John's navigator called out, "We have a clear shot." With one final, coordinated maneuver, John's ship dove into the heart of the enemy's defenses. The flagship was massive, and the eye-controlled ships were relentless, but the humans had a secret weapon: their adaptability. They fought not just with technology, but with their instincts, their creativity, and their unbreakable spirit. They understood that survival depended on more than just weapons. It depended on outthinking the enemy, outmaneuvering them at every turn. The final battle played out like a symphony of destruction. John's team moved with deadly precision, striking the flagship's weak points with expertly aimed shots. The massive alien ship groaned under the assault, its hull beginning to buckle. But even as they fought, they could feel the clock ticking down, the alien weapon charging up for one final strike. John's ship shook violently as a nearby explosion rocked their craft. His heart pounded in his chest, but he pushed through the pain. The moment of truth was upon them. "Ready the final strike," John shouted. The team launched their final attack, sending a concentrated barrage of energy directly at the alien flagship's main power core. The energy beam tore through the hull, hitting the core and causing a massive explosion. The flagship shuddered, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though time itself had stopped. Then, with a deafening roar, the flagship detonated, a brilliant flash of light engulfing the surrounding space. John's ship was rocked by the shockwave, but they held steady, their mission complete. The alien fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. The remaining eye-controlled machines ceased their attacks, and Earth's skies began to clear. The battle was over. But the victory came at a cost. John looked around at his team, their faces battered but triumphant. They had survived the impossible, but the weight of their losses still lingered. The memory of Lieutenant Carter's sacrifice, the cost of the battle, and the uncertainty of the future all weighed heavily on them. John sat back in his seat, his breath shallow as he processed everything that had just happened. They had won, but at what price? The war was over, but the scars would remain. Earth had been saved, but humanity had been forever changed. As the final remnants of the alien fleet retreated into the darkness of space, John allowed himself a moment of relief. But even as he exhaled, he knew that the fight for Earth's future wasn't truly over. The galaxy was vast, and there were always new threats lurking in the shadows. But for now, they had won. And that victory, against all odds, was something that would be remembered for generations to come. "We did it," Lieutenant Grant said, breaking the silence. John nodded, his eyes hardening with resolve. This is just the beginning. The roar of the final explosion still echoed in Captain John's ears as he gazed out into the vastness of space. The alien flagship had been destroyed, and the remaining invaders had retreated, their hold over Earth finally broken. Victory, in all its glory, was theirs, but even in the wake of their triumph, a heavy silence hung in the air. The battle had been brutal, and the cost had been immense. Earth's cities were still smoldering from the orbital bombardments. The skies that had once been filled with alien ships now stood eerily quiet, but that silence was only temporary. Humanity had fought fiercely, but the scars of war were visible. Entire populations had been wiped out in the wake of the invasion, and many families had lost loved ones. The victory felt hollow, though hard-won. John sat in his command chair, his hands still gripping the armrests as he watched Earth's battered surface slowly coming into view through the viewport. The devastation was hard to ignore. The cities that had once been symbols of human achievement now lay in ruins, a reminder of the price they had paid for this hard-fought peace. He thought of the fallen comrades, those who had made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that Earth would survive. Lieutenant Carter's face flashed in his mind. He could still hear her voice, the last words she'd spoken as she laid down her life for the mission. John had promised to lead them to victory, but he hadn't been able to save everyone. He hadn't been able to save her. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Grant. "Sir, the skies are clear. The alien fleet is retreating." John nodded, his gaze still fixed on the planet below. "I know, but this isn't over. Not really." Grant fell silent, sensing the weight of John's words. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was a vast, uncharted place filled with unknown threats. If this alien fleet had come to Earth, who's to say there wouldn't be more? Other empires could be watching, waiting for their moment to strike. "What do we do now?" Grant asked, his voice low. It was a question everyone was asking, but no one had the answer. John turned to face him, his expression hardening. "We rebuild. We strengthen. We prepare. This victory doesn't mean the end of our struggles. It means we have a chance to survive. But we can't take that chance for granted." The realization hit harder than any explosion. Yes, Earth had won this battle, but the alien empires that had once ruled the galaxy weren't just going to disappear. They were watching, learning, waiting. It was only a matter of time before another threat emerged, one that might not be so easily defeated. But that wasn't a thought John was willing to entertain just yet. They had won. The alien threat had been crushed, and humanity had shown that they were capable of incredible resilience and strength. John thought of the people back on Earth, the survivors who would rebuild from the ashes, who would fight to ensure their future. And that thought brought him a flicker of hope. "Prepare the fleet for return," John said firmly. "We're going back home." The ships that had once been warriors in the fight against the alien invaders now turned their course toward Earth. The fighters, still covered in scorch marks and damage from the battle, began their descent through the atmosphere. As they passed through the cloud cover, Earth's surface came into clearer view. The fires were dying down, the dust was settling, but the damage was still widespread. The people on the ground had already begun their efforts to rebuild. Earth wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Humanity had faced destruction, but they had risen above it. They were survivors. And now, with the alien threat neutralized, they could begin the long process of healing. John leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought about the sacrifices that had been made, the soldiers who had fallen, the civilians who had perished, but he also thought about what those sacrifices had earned. A future, a chance for a new beginning. The ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, and John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The battle was over, but the real fight had only just begun. He could see the bright, burning horizon of the sun as the ship approached its landing site. The familiar sight of the Earth's surface, with its forests, oceans, and cities slowly coming into view, filled him with a deep sense of pride. They had saved this world. They had held their ground against an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. The Earth was battered and broken, but it was still alive, still holding on. "We're home," Grant said quietly, breaking the stillness of the moment. John nodded, his eyes focused ahead. "We're not just going home. We're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." The battle was over, but the mission was not. The alien invaders had retreated, but there would be others. Earth had become a target, and now humanity would have to be ready to defend it from whatever new threats would come next. As the ship touched down, the doors opened, and John stepped out onto the Earth he had fought so hard to protect. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and ash, but there was also the unmistakable feeling of rebirth in the air. The world had been brought to its knees, but it was standing tall once again. They had won, but the war wasn't over. The galaxy was vast, and Earth was no longer an unknown planet to be ignored. It had become a battleground, a prize in the eyes of other empires. And now, humanity was prepared to fight again. With his hand on his chest, John looked out over the wreckage. It was a new day, and humanity, though scared, was ready to face whatever came next. They were no longer just survivors. They were protectors, protectors of Earth, protectors of humanity. And they would never back down.